This is vitamins video number 5 from a nutrition class. Should be the last video. The last three vitamins are folic acid, B12, and vitamin C. So folic acid and B12 are very similar in that they kind of work with each other inside the body. If we talk about folic acid itself, it's actually very important for every time a cell makes new DNA or an animal or a mammal makes new DNA. So in terms of pregnancy, making red blood cells in bone marrow, your GI tract, there's a lot of turnover of cells and a lot of DNA being made. So you fundamentally need folate. And that's why it's so important during pregnancy. The sources of folate really are the whole grains and the leafy greens and kale and those kinds of foods. And those may not be the kind of foods that most Americans eat. Many pregnant women may not want to eat those in the first trimester. And not surprisingly, we did add folate along with B1, B2, B3, and iron to the enrichment process. So yes, kale is a great source of folate, but it's also in breakfast cereals and cookies and crackers. I just had saltine crackers before making this video, and I had some folate. And look at papaya. Holy smokes. But there's your whole grain cereal, white rice, spinach. These are all the whole foods, but it's also in the processed foods. And oddly enough, when you add folate to processed foods, it doesn't diminish its ability to be absorbed. It's actually absorbed very well from processed foods. So, deficiency during pregnancy can cause a birth defect. Next slide. This slide is talking about adults. In adults, and typically women, if there is deficiency of folate, what we see is an anemia, so a red blood cell count issue that's a little different. In iron deficiency, the red blood cells are smaller, that's called microcytic, and they're paler, that's called hypochromic, they're less color. In folate deficiency, we see macrocytic or megaloblastic. They're larger, my throat, and more immature red blood cells. So you almost can determine folate deficiency using a microscope. And then during pregnancy, we know if there's not enough folate, and you need folate literally in the beginning of pregnancy. You should have it the day you become pregnant, right? The day of conception. When the spinal cord and the first part of the fetus is being developed without folate, you get an incomplete closure of the spinal cord. That's called spina bifida. It can be mild, it can be severe. It just depends on the severity of it. So, by the way, for folate toxicity, there isn't any. You can pee it out, and we find a ton of folate in prenatal vitamins. So the two big things for folate are spina bifida during pregnancy, anemia in adults. In women long term who have folate deficiency, they are at increased risk for some types of cancer. B12 is kind of like folate, right? It works with folate. It's also important, though, for the protection of the sheaths of your neurons. So if you had B12 deficiency, you could develop also nerve damage. And typically that's peripheral nerve damage, so the fingers and the hands. B12 is also only found in animal tissue. Do I have a little slide? It's only found in animal tissue. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, you can now find it in fortified products like soy milk and cereal. Many products are now fortified with B12, but in nature, it's in animal tissue. To develop a deficiency would be one of two options. You don't eat it, it's in animal tissue, and you don't eat animal tissue, and you don't eat fortified products, nor do you take a supplement. Or it's genetic. We humans make a protein called intrinsic factor. When you eat B12 in, let's say, meat, and the meat gets in the stomach, and the proteins become denatured, and B12 is freed up from the food, it binds to intrinsic factor. And what we actually absorb is a complex molecule of this protein, intrinsic factor, and B12. If you genetically don't make the intrinsic factor, that's about 1 out of 5,000 people. They don't make it properly. They can't absorb B12. You can take supplements all day. You will develop deficiency symptoms. And typically that's going to be things like paralysis on the outside. If you do have this pernicious, if you can't absorb it because of this, you'll end up getting the anemia similar to folate, and it won't go away. So that's called pernicious anemia. And the way you treat it is pretty simple. Injection. So folks that you may know, or you yourself, who periodically, once a month, once every 2 months, have to have a B12 shot, like prescribed by the doctor, not for some weird weight loss thing or something. That's typically folks who genetically can't absorb the B12 and therefore end up having to have an injection to bypass the GI tract. Getting the injection is fine. You won't have B12 deficiency. Okay, last vitamin is vitamin C, also called ascorbic acid. It's probably the most famous in terms of its involvement in sailors and being at sea. It is in fresh fruits and vegetables, and if you were a sailor for starting about 200 years ago or later, and you went to sea, by about 1 month, there's no fresh anything on board. It's salted pork and salted fish and salted beef and rum and weird bread and weird bread products like hardtack, which is like flour and pork fat and beef all mixed together. You would develop scurvy, the deficiency of vitamin C. And you basically start falling apart because even though most folks know that you need vitamin C for antioxidant activity to defend the body like vitamin E, it's also used to make collagen. That's basically human glue. It keeps the body connected. And so it actually really was the British, the first folks to purposefully enact the use of citrus on board naval vessels to help protect the British sailors from developing scurvy. Let's see if I have the deficiency symptoms here. I don't. Oh, I do. But by the way, if you look at this chart, yeah, it's in fruit. It's also in bell peppers. It's also in green bell peppers. It's also in Brussels sprouts. It's also in cabbage. It's also in potatoes, or usually in the skin. You don't have to have fruit to get vitamin C. Kimchi and sauerkraut are very good sources. So deficiency is scurvy, poor wound healing, anemia, bruising. Literally, your teeth fall out because they're being glued to your head using collagen. So we don't see much scurvy anymore, usually because it's hard to find anything in American diet that doesn't have vitamin C added to it. It's in everything now. You can see toxicity, actually, for people who are taking supplements. If you are at risk for kidney stones, so like kidney stones are stones that form in the kidney, it can run in families. The standard of care is you should not take vitamin C supplements and actually be wary of calcium supplements. Those can help form these kidney stone products. There's other things too that also trigger stone formation, a lot of protein, extreme amounts of leafy greens. But again, that's usually in folks who have stone formation in the family. So yes, you can get toxicity of vitamin C. It also can cause cramping and a little bit of kind of an ill failing in your GI tract. Ascorbic acid, vitamin C is an acid, so large doses would be kind of taking an acidic product. And that's it. The slides at the end that I have are not responsible for this class. So if you're viewing this in my Canvas shell, you have access to some slides that I won't cover in this video because it's not required for the class. That's it. That's the last video.